drove instead of his wife and banged into a car driven by one Mr. Manzella.
60 seconds till we're live. I'm just letting you know. I got the text.
But that's a story for another day.
I guess this might actually be a lively meeting tonight. I wasn't feeling it, but
There you go.
now that Larry's telling stories
There you go.
of his 30s.
I can tell some stories from my 20s if you want.
Character. Yeah, that's it.
This is pretty, Doug. I like the visual. Okay, this is new.
Welcome to the Rockland Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 18, 2020. Please stand and join us in the pledge of allegiance.
Wait for Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded by WRPS for playback on Comcast Channel 14 and Verizon Channel 31. It will also be available for online video on-demand viewing at WRPSRockland.com within 24 hours of its conclusion. As our other recently recorded meeting and community events, please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. Okay, first on the agenda is community announcements. We were asked by a veteran who served with Mr. Frank Manzella if we could make February 20th, 2020, recognize it as Frank Manzella Day in Rockland. Frank is turning 96 on February 20th. Mr. Manzella was a sergeant in the U.S. Marine Corps from 1943 to 1946, World War II, and was U.S. Navy 3rd Class 1951 to 1952 in Korea. Mr. Manzella was a Rockland volunteer in the 1960s, serving on the Finance Committee, Town Hall Building Committee, and Fire Station Addition Building Committee. He also donated land for Hartson Park and sewer pump stations. So as a board, we've come up with a plaque to officially declare February 20th, 2020, Frank Manzella Day. So, and we'll get this to one of his family's representatives. Any comments? Anybody? Larry?
For the service.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep.
For the dedication to the town.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Next on the agenda, open session minutes for February 4th, 2020.
I make a motion to approve the open session minutes of February 4th, 2020.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, under old business, FY21 budget. Mr. Lapp.
Before we do that, would it be possible,
Oh.
I had, yep,
I got you. I forgot. I totally glossed over John. All right, so under new business, we're going to go to John Lucas for Rockland Day.
Hey, John.
John, how are you?
Fine, thank you. And to the rest of you also. Selectmen and selectwomen, I'd just like to give you an update, if I can, on Rockland Day as to what we're planning and get your approval if possible. It's going to be this the Saturday, June 20th. It's an all-day event. This will be the 4th year that we've had this event. The last 3 years have been very successful. This year, again, the same as last year, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., we will have vendors. And I think now we have close to 20 vendors that have signed up and paid for it. We will also have pony rides, train rides, face painting, and balloon artist. This year, the fire department hopes to bring the safe house down there that day for the kids to learn some safety on fire safety and that type of thing. I've seen it demonstrated before, and it's a tremendous, tremendous thing for the kids to learn and to kind of play with it and come out comfortable. Chief Duffy has also agreed, everything working out for him, that he's going to take a small area, fence it in, and fill it with foam for the kids to play in. And we'll probably break that down to a couple age groups, the younger kids and then the older kids, and probably the adults that want to play in the foam.
That's a little later in the night.
Could be.
I'm just going to leave it alone.
We're also going to have an obstacle
I've got
course,
nothing.
games, and races for the kids, pretty much all day long. One big addition this year,
there we
and
go.
I'd like to ask for the help from the selectmen, we're going to have a dunk tank.
Yeah.
And I have had commitments from the fire chief, the police chief, several detectives on the police department. And I'd like to see if we can get 5 volunteers from the Board of Selectmen.
Well, I already committed, so
You did.
Yeah.
This was brought up with Doug Lapp a while ago, and he volunteered immediately. Unfortunately, he has,
he
Had a-
volunteered us.
he's got a personal commitment that day for a wedding, and he
Yeah.
has offered to give me a copy of the ticket, so that, or the invitation, so that he's not playing with us on that. We'll miss him. But if we can get several volunteers, we very much appreciate it.
Well, I don't know if
Very good.
anybody, if we get any money out of that, I don't think we could raise money from us getting a dunk tank, right?
Oh, I bet you there'd be a lot of people that
Yeah.
would pay $10. We might make a lot of money.
We will advertise what times each of you are there.
Yeah, there you go. I know if
Well,
it'll be down the
it's,
throat.
it's my wife's birthday, so that'll be my gift to her,
Very good.
if I thought she could hit a target. But
We will have bands all day long. Most of the bands that were there last year and seem to be accepted by everybody. We'll have food trucks from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m., and I've had 1 or 2 commit that they're going to stay through the fireworks. If I forgot to mention it, we will have fireworks that night. We're in the process of getting the bids right now. And it looks very promising. We're going to have a wiffle ball tournament from 1 to somewhere between 7 and 8 p.m. It's going to be a double elimination tournament this year with approximately 24 teams competing. Fireworks will begin between 9 and 9:15, depending on the weather and a few other things that are beyond our control. They will be shot off from Bicentennial Field, the same as last year, and they'll be viewed from Lower Memorial Field. And we've got a committee that's been raising funds, so it should not cost the town any money whatsoever, the same as the last number of years. If you've got any questions, you can get a hold of Christine McGinnis at the Police Department, myself downstairs at the Building Department, or Jeannie Belaney at the Youth Commission. You can go up online at www.rockland-mass.gov/Rockland Day if you are in a position to volunteer or to act as a sponsor, or if you're looking for a vendor space. And there's plenty of space left. That's pretty much it. If any of you have questions that I can answer.
anybody have any questions for you?
I don't have any, John. Thank you for what you do
Hey,
on this.
I saw State Rep David DeCoste saddling up to you, trying to get a free ticket into the door the other day on Facebook.
Yes, but he did volunteer to go in the dunk tank too,
There you go.
so that may generate some more cash.
I'm gonna have to warm the arm up then, because I'm sure he's gonna be throwing them at me.
John, how are you doing with sponsors?
It's been a little bit slow. We've got probably somewhere around half of what we need in sponsorships now. We do have a grant sponsor. A.W. Perry has donated $5,000. Through Doug's efforts, National Grid has donated $1,500. Sullivan Tire has given us $3,000. So it's going forward, and we've got postcards that are going to be going out probably next week to remind people. We have sent them all letters, all the businesses. Postcards will be going out this coming week, which will probably generate some more.
So if somebody wanted to sponsor, would they go to that website?
They can go to that
Go to that
website, they
website, sign
can
up there,
contact
see all the
me,
different
they can
sponsorships.
contact Christine or Jeannie,
Excellent, okay.
That's whether it's a business or a individual.
either way.
And they could also make donations, I'm sure, if you
Yes, they can.
you'll accept donations from all residents?
Yes.
Glad,
That's all on them.
gleefully, I mean gladly?
That's all on the website, so.
Very good.
And
Excellent
all
job. You do a
generate-
great job there,
All
John.
donations will be gratefully accepted.
No matter how small. That's
That's
all we
correct.
always say.
Right.
Great, thank you.
John, the only thing, I just want to say thank you to you and the entire team. This thing has, I see this becoming very similar to the holiday stroll.
Yeah.
That it actually becomes a tradition in town, and the work by the volunteers is just incredible. I don't know if people understand how much time and effort is put into it, and it's just become a great event. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you, and I will pass that on the committee. There's probably 12 active people on the committee that have met once a month. Without, like you said, without all of them, you can't do this.
Right.
It's not something that one person can do. I can chair it, but I can't do it all.
You got it well organized.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, old business, FY21 budget. Doug.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is go over the updated calendar that I put in your binder, and then I'd like to kind of transition into the next item on the agenda, which is the town meeting warrant article process. As it relates to the budget, I just think it'll kind of tie things together, and then we can get into the numbers, if that's okay. So the updated schedule I included in your binder is how I'm hoping things will shake out. So, and this reflects some updated conversations I've had with the Capital Planning Committee and with the Finance Committee. So our goal is to have the Capital Planning Committee send me some draft scores and their draft ranked capital plan by the end of their meeting on February 27th. That'll just help inform me, give me some updated info prior to that first Selectmen's meeting in March. Then on March 5th, they'll send me and the Finance Committee their final capital plan. Then that all ties into the next Selectmen's meeting on March 17th, which is a target date that I had outlined earlier to get you what I hope will be the final budget, which hopefully by then there'll have been enough review that you'll be comfortable with that, and we'll forward that to the Finance Committee for their meeting on March 18th. And then a week later, on March 25th, the Finance Committee will hopefully be comfortable with that, make their final budget recommendations, and then the first meeting in April is when you sign the warrant. So that's how I'm hoping things will line out. So kind of going back to the process, because I think this will help the discussion. My experience and what I've been exposed to in the past has led me to have the assumption that my objective and my goal is to present a balanced budget in the warrant that ideally everything would pass. So we have the operating budget, capital budget, any outside articles, everything we propose has a funding source and will pass. So that seems obvious to me, but the reason why I bring it up is because we had an all-department head staff meeting last week, and this is the beauty of having these staff meetings. People share information, and we make sure that there's no confusion or misunderstandings. And several department heads explained, as I was giving deadlines for when I wanted any requests to come to me so that I could synthesize that with the town accountant, present them to you to figure out what was going to be on the warrant. What was expressed to me was that some felt that in the past there was a different process where essentially more would get put on the warrant, more things than could actually ultimately be able to be funded, and that it was really up to the voters to pick and choose which things they'd want to fund or not. And presumably there's somebody keeping tally on the side to make sure the budget's balanced in the end and we don't overspend. So both Biz and I, being very new, were having physical reactions to this, and we're getting very anxious, and we had a long discussion about it, and I explained that that's not what I wanted to do. I only want to present things that we can recommend and that we can fund. So again, everything on the warrant is recommended for approval. But there was a lot of back and forth on this, and so I wanted to make sure to bring this discussion to you to make sure I was on the right page, that was your expectation and how what you expected to have happen for town meetings.
So you and I had a conversation earlier this week about that. I don't know that that's ever been the process. The process has always been those articles or capital items have gone to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee has whittled it down to a final warrant. They'll approve the articles, but every article that's on that warrant has a funding source attached to it, usually provided by the town accountant, as we talked about. We've never gone to town meeting.
But we go to town meeting where we have warrants that we pass over.
They're
They're
No,
already
not-
marked as passed over.
But they're
Yeah.
marked.
They're not.
They're already marked passed over, but they're
Some
still
will be
on,
passed
they're
over.
still on the
But
warrant.
most of the time, we don't even have that on it.
Yeah.
That was
that's-
only last year as
And
a,
that's usually if just something falls through the cracks
No,
after
I know.
printing.
Every year that I've ever been involved with the town of Rockland, there are articles that are on there that we say that
That the
we're
finance
passing
committee
over.
recommends
We did-
passing
we
over.
did- Yeah, we didn't recommend. It wasn't that it
Sure.
wasn't there. It was there. Some of them were read, some of them were just passed over.
But I
they
think-
were there.
Yeah, sure, but I think with that, it's because it got on the warrant at one point by the finance committee, and then the funding source fell through after the warrant had been printed.
but if you go back over the last 10 years, we've only had 1 or 2 instances where there has been a warrant on there that the finance committee did not recommend because we didn't have a funding source.
No, you're right. I
In the
agree.
last 10
Yeah.
years, I can attest to it, and me and Doug had a conversation on this. Me and Mike were on the FinCom together. Virtually every warrant article that was on there had a funding source. You know, the process went through, and the department heads would bring their requests to the finance committee. We would actually, as a committee, ask them to prioritize what their capital plans were, what was the most important. Then we'd work internally to see where we had a funding source, and the only things that made it to the article was those things that had a funding source. And it's one of the reasons why our town meeting goes as quickly as it does, is that every article on there that's a financial article has a funding source. I actually gave you, I think, 2 examples over the last 10 years that we didn't have a funding source to it.
But I think to your point though, Larry, you are right. If there is something that ends up on the on the warrant that says pass over,
Right.
The
But those- but
residents
those
could
articles
turn.
have- But
Yeah,
those
sure.
articles have come up.
the residents could
for-
turn and vote for it.
Could turn and vote for
They
it.
could go
but-
against the recommendation.
Yeah, but one of
Sure.
the things that we did was that if anybody wanted to change an article or add an article or do
Have
it,
an amendment.
they had to provide where they were going to cut from the budget in order to fund their article, if you will. So if the fire department said, we're going to get a brand-new pumper this year, and we need it, we're going to get it, and we don't care if the town can't afford it, we need it, we're going to go for it, and they get it. Where's the money going to come from? He has to provide an area where he's got to get the people to pass the cut in order to do his article. And that was one of the things we did out of the way. I don't think it's legal, you do what we do. If he votes for it, then it's up to the
But I
town
think-
to find out where the money's going to come from.
But I think there would be an amendment on the floor as opposed to being printed on the articles.
Yeah,
At
it's
least,
not in the
at least in
Yeah.
the last 10 years. At least in the
In the
last
last
10 years.
Yeah,
years,
okay,
Larry,
last
it
10 years,
hasn't
but I know,
happened.
well,
I
I
can
go
tell
back
you-
a few years
I can tell you
before
for a
Yep.
fact in the last 10 years, that's not how we've done it.
that. Doug wants it.
No, this is really, I'm glad we're having this conversation because this is really important for me. So there was one thing a couple of you said, and I've also heard the Finance Committee and some department heads say that I also want to, excuse me, kind of flesh out a little bit, which is sort of who ultimately decides what gets on the warrant or not. So what I want to say is, it's the Board of Selectmen. That's who under state law,
Correct.
you set the warrant. And I've heard from other committees talking about, in the past, there have been issues where, I won't name anybody, but, one department head may not have withdrawn, something from the warrant or not. And I don't understand how that can happen, because a department head, I don't set the warrant, nor does any department head. You set the warrant. So that's why, in my mind, the way this should work is, I work with our financial team. We present you with a balanced budget where everything's funded. You give the input. You might tell us to change things, swap things out, whatever. But then when you make your final decision, you set the warrant, and that's that. And then voters get to vote on that if they want to fund it. We're not going to add other things that somebody else might want that you don't want to put on the warrant that we don't think is
And we send it to the
important.
Finance Committee to get their recommendation. on it.
recommendation.
And if they
That's it.
choose not to
As an
recommend it-
advisory. Great.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
it's still, it's on the
I
warrant based on what we
actually, I
ask.
like it much better. I think it's much better because we go into town meeting very well prepared anyway. And last town meeting was a perfect example of that. And so that it'd be much better to go in knowing that every article is paid for, and we either vote yes or no on it, but why not vote yes if the money's already there?
Right.
And it makes them, we go through a town meeting faster than any other towns anywhere. I don't care who they are,
Like, even though, I have to concur with everyone, what we have done, like, in the whole, like, in going back 3 months ago to the Saturday session we had,
outlining our hopes for your goals, Doug. One of, our top priorities, as you know, is really streamlining this whole process. And I think, where we were, it worked. But, there was, in my opinion, a process where, in the process itself, there were people who threw things up against the wall to see what really stuck to the wall without having a plan, like a real holistic capital plan to guide us all the way through. And I think what we have now, even though it might be more streamlined and centralized through you, I think really is what I think we all envisioned. In this process. So there was there was a real synergy in the process. There was a real cohesiveness in it, and it's exactly what I anyways have had hoped for. So we don't go through a process where on the path one department will be put against another. In terms of what their priorities were. In this process that you've really envisioned and created and worked with our board, the capital planning committee, and the finance committee, it's just a much more healthy of a process. So I think it's incredible.
I'm happy to hear that, and I think it's what's the most common
Yes.
way of approaching municipal finances. There's budget requests from department heads, the administrator and the financial team synthesize that, review it, make recommendations, work with the selectmen to finalize a budget, finalize the warrant, and that's what gets voted on, not kind of haphazard other things that may or may not have funding. All right, thank you. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So then if we turn to what hopefully is the next page in your binder, which is at the top it says certified free cash. Is that your next page? So I just wanted to highlight where I'm at now, and what it looks like, and there's still more to go. We got about a month, if you look at the schedule I had earlier. So the way it's looking right now is, again, we start with the same certified free cash number of $2,076,000. There's a number of things that we've been talking about this for a while that we have to fund right off the top because of some budget shortfalls. Budgeting for Medicare withholdings, the liens that are required through the collector's office, contractual buyouts, which we traditionally don't budget for. Snow and ice is a big number there for the deficit. That number reflects an average that the town accountant that Biz calculated, using actual numbers. But it's obviously been a mild winter, so cross our fingers. Hopefully, we're not going to need this, and maybe as we get by that March 17th date, we can scale that number back. But throughout all this, we're trying to be conservative. But hopefully, we won't need all that, and we can use some of that to fund other parts of our capital program. And then the waste collection budget shortfall. So the number that I highlighted next with some of those expenses that we have to fund off the top, I highlighted it in yellow, is utilities. So working with Biz, I mentioned this before, we're concerned that we may be short in the current year on our utilities. I'm not certain, though, so I'm continuing to work on this aggressively. I may know more within a week or two. You'll notice, conveniently, coincidentally, there's another blank area highlighted in yellow down below, and I'll come back to the numbers in between, but what I've highlighted down below is a capital request that as of when I printed this, I'm not able to fund, which is a new administration vehicle for the fire department. Purely coincidentally, that number also comes in at $65,000. So if I'm able to figure out the utilities and not have to take that out of free cash, that's going to free up the $65,000 to take care of that fire utility vehicle. So I'll get back to the rest of those in a minute. So when there's about $890,000 of expenses right off the top that we have to use our free cash for, that brings the number available free cash down to $1.185 million. Then there's a couple items that we've spoken about in the past. The first one is $200,000 that's labeled here accountant's holdback. Again, just think of that as being conservative, setting a little bit aside as like a reserve so we don't spend every single penny of free cash in case something else comes up later in the year. That's essentially just a 10% of the $2 million up above. In a previous version of this, I think we just had like about 150,000 going into stabilization and nothing going into OPEB. And then in our financial department head meetings, talking with John Ellard, the treasurer, who had been talking to all the different rating agencies that are going to be rating us pretty soon when we go out to bond for the school building construction project, they actually indicated that putting something into OPEB really does help your bond rating. Even though, and as I'll go over in a minute, we're actually taking a little bit out of OPEB as well to fund some retiree health benefits. So my initial thinking was, why bother if we're just going to be taking it out? But it actually does
So the
help.
commitment.
So we just split it 50/50. So instead of the whole 150 going to stabilization, we're splitting it 50/50. So that leaves about 835,000 left in free cash. So again, I want to take responsibility for this. This is just my feeling where we are now for what I think the priorities might be. Capital Planning Committee is still hearing from departments and still reviewing things. But what I've listed here is the final lease payment for a fire vehicle, a new mini fire engine for $250,000.
Can you explain that real quick? What is a mini fire engine?
It's not a big pumper. So it's literally like a smaller vehicle with a small tank on the back that's like a fast reaction vehicle that can handle smaller situations and get it under control till the bigger apparatus arrives.
So I talked to Scott a little bit on this. So one of the advantages, and he said there are other departments that are doing this, so we always, when an ambulance goes out, we always try to send, an
truck with
engine
it.
with it.
Yeah.
So we're sending, this big,
Massive,
large
yeah.
engine. So they're
Send this
finding
back.
with this that they're still able to use this to fight fires, but better gas mileage, it's more geared to go out on a
Make
joint
that-
call, that it actually, and it comes in a lot less money, so it makes a lot of sense.
No, that makes sense. Like, just the name of it, like a mini engine.
And I think that's something, if this stays on all the way through, we should have the chief explain it in more detail, better than I can. The next item is $180,000 for, it says repair, it's really rebuild the road and the drainage at the recycling center. So I've been struggling with this one because right below that is Mill and Pave Gardner Street, which I've also received some complaints from a few residents about. But my understanding is, and I have driven down it, so I know, the road at the recycling center is atrocious. It's just terrible. And the Board of Health gets weekly complaints from multiple residents, different residents, every week. So it's, it's something that's highly traveled by a large number of residents. The health agent, Delshawn, is looking at doing a larger engineering study of the whole recycling center to improve the whole flow and, getting ADA compliance with the containers and figuring out a better flow, all that. So what we're envisioning here is not the front end where you're actually disposing of stuff, but the road going all the way back where you're doing leaves and brush and all that other stuff. We got this number from Dave Taylor, so we feel confident it's a good number. So I think this is something that if we're able to fund would be a big improvement for residents. Again, I had Gardner Street on here earlier. I'd love it if we'd be able to do it. Dave does not feel that he's able to fund that within the funds that he has available and through the road bond. So it's something that if we can't do here, we'll have to tackle later. The IT equipment upgrades, this is for hardware. My understanding is in the past, there's been like a $48,000, I call it capital, outside warrant article appropriations been made essentially annually for these hardware upgrades. The reason why it's 30 is because I asked Gino to reduce the number, just because I'm trying to make it all work. 30 would still enable him to replace a lot of PCs and buy a lot of switches and other equipment that he needs to do. That's what that's for. The police station roof was on here in the last iteration. I met with the police chief on Friday. I want to get a better sense of how urgent that need is. It clearly does need a roof. He says it really doesn't have to be done in FY21. We can wait another year or so that's why I put that off. Cruisers, the 2 police cruisers, we absolutely have to do. The $50,000 for town capital projects, I believe we absolutely have to do. I have a lot more than 50,000 of items already lined up, and that's not taking into consideration things that might just break. And then the last 4 items total a little under $190,000. These are items straight from the school department. These are all the requests they had. I didn't filter that in any way. Looks like there's a standing technology appropriation that's made annually, and then a number of leases, sped vans, buses, and a dump and plow truck. So when you add all that up, that totals a little under $140,000. So we're actually, according to this, we're over by just a couple $1,000, so we could obviously figure that out. So this is kind of where I'm at now, big picture. Any questions on that? The next page is, again, that same thing you've had before. That's just the grand total list of all the town capital projects. The total's $3.5 million. Again, there's a number of items on here that are large, but we have offsets for revenue because things like a fire station, a community center won't be funded through this traditional means that have to be debt exclusions. And there's a couple items that might be coming out of, say, the sewer department where they have funding, or the library where we're looking to do it through the Community Preservation Act. But this way, you can at least see the total need. I was also just made aware through the police department that in addition to their roof, there's also a flat roof. I think it's over the Sally Port in the back, and they have a large mechanical HVAC unit on it. Both that flat roof and that HVAC unit, sometime over the next few years, 3-4 years, that will need to be replaced. So I'm just letting you know about that as well. So then I thought the next thing that would be helpful would be if we could just go through the budget. And what I've done here is I've highlighted a whole bunch of things in yellow that I just want to raise your attention to so that you're aware of it. If you want, I can just kind of quickly go through them. If you want to stop at any point, let me know. You know, my main purpose was to get you thinking about this so that over the course of the next month, I can make changes, you know, based on your direction. The first thing on the first page, I highlighted that we're transferring out of the OPEB trust fund $100,000 to offset retiree health costs. So that's what I mentioned earlier. Again, my initial thinking was, well, since we're taking money out of OPEB, what's the point of putting it in? Because we do have a very healthy balance in OPEB. And again, based on the information John got, it's still good to appropriate funds. But we're, you know, ideally, in an ideal world, we wouldn't take anything out of OPEB. But to balance the budget, that's what we need to do. Again, the town's been pretty aggressive. You know, I think there's $900,000 in OPEB, and this is legit. It's for, you know, retiree health expenses. So it seems like in the past we'd appropriate a lot of money in OPEB and then expense money out. Personally, I think it might be simpler, just appropriate a little bit less going in and not take any out each year, but it's just a different way of doing it. So I just want to highlight, bring that to your attention. If you flip...
Okay, I just have one question
sure.
on that, Doug. In terms of the actual, like retiree health insurance costs, those are the, I mean, obviously we have our health insurance increase, and and what we're anticipating for our health insurance increase is, especially for retirees, is more than we can, is more than our ability to pay. That's why we're going to dip into this $100,000, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Health insurance, you know, generally increases by more than 2.5% a year.
Thank you.
So if you flip forward a few pages, it'll say 6 of 29 in the lower right-hand corner. You get to the Board of Selectmen budget. So I think you know this already, but I just want to make it crystal clear so there's no confusion. So my salary, the town administrator salary, looks like there's a $14,000 jump in there, but there's really not, because what was voted at the annual town meeting was not the amount that we ultimately negotiated my contract for. So what I have plugged in yellow for my salary only reflects a 2.5% increase above what I'm currently making. So it looks like a large jump only because what was voted at the annual town meeting was not, that was voted long before, you know, I was brought on board and negotiated a salary. You'll see that there's a line highlighted for regulatory secretary where there's, you know, nothing voted in 2020 and nothing recommended yet in 2021. This is something I talked about in my presentation before about one of our long-term needs. Well, since just that last meeting 2 weeks ago, I've learned that it's very likely that the person that's been doing the staffing for our Zoning Board of Appeals, who's been doing it for many, many years and does an outstanding job, is going to be retiring next year in the middle of FY21. So this, I think, is kind of bringing to a forefront me wanting to revisit this topic. So I don't have a number in here yet, and haven't figured out a way to fund it. But again, I just want to highlight what my vision might be, is look for a new part-time person. So part-time meaning maybe 3 hours a day, Monday to Friday, have set office hours. And they would be like the intake regulatory secretary for zoning, planning, and conservation. So they would give better customer service. People could actually have a person during the day that would be knowledgeable about their processes. They could get the applications, ask any questions, make sure the information's complete. And then that person, the staff person, would communicate with the chairs of the committees, make sure things got on the right agendas, got the advertising got done, et cetera. The people that we hire part-time that are going to the meetings at night, taking all the minutes, they would still stay. This person would not do that. This is just someone to be in the office at Town Hall, because everybody on these boards are working during the day with their own private lives.
Just a resource for the residents.
Excuse me?
A resource for the residents?
Exactly,
Okay.
a resource for the residents.
And
So,
also one
And for the
place
staff. Yep.
to actually go to, and so you'd look at something that was 19 hours or less a week, no
Exactly.
benefits, part-time.
exactly. So, my plan with that is I'm going to try to set up a meeting with the chairs of those 3 committees. Obviously, I need to make sure they're on board and that they think this would be helpful. I've had a couple of informal discussions. I need to make sure they're all good. The next one ultimately needs to be, the line needs to be relabeled. It's labeled here as administrative assistant. This is going back. So this is actually the assistant town administrator's position. So I've put in here a $10,000 raise because I don't think an $80,000 salary for an assistant town administrator is appropriate, given that to be making less than a lot of the staff that they're supervising. So something we can certainly talk more about, but that to me is really a minimum that should increase. The next line is a new line, professional and technical. So this was actually something that a different department asked for their budget, and I actually asked to put it in mine so that I could use it, we could use it for any department. So 3 examples of things that this could be used for might be if we have to hire an appraiser to look at some properties. I mentioned the utilities issue that I'm looking at earlier. That involves some really complicated solar net metering credits and how all that's working. I might need to get a little technical assistance on that. And the accounting department, I know, would like to do a lot more aggressive munis training for more of their staff. So these are all like really good things. Any other department could have some similar type of thing for their use. So that's the intent of this $10,000, is for those types of random professional and technical uses. And then what's labeled as selectmen MMA dues, I just wanted to highlight that the increase there is really because I'm also a member of the ICMA, which I mentioned at earlier meetings, and that's why that increase is there. Going down to accounting, the OPEB report, this is something we're required to do, so that's an actual hard number from the town accountant to have the actuarial report done for OPEB liabilities. The accounting increase in dues and seminars is attributable to them wanting more of their staff to get professional development, which I wholeheartedly support. Moving on to the treasurer's office, this is one thing there'll be sort of a common thread throughout. Wherever there's a department head who's either elected or has a contract and the contract is set to expire, I've plugged in 2.5% salary increase across the board. It's something we can certainly talk more about. That's what I've done so far. And the increase in tax title in the treasurer's office is just to more accurately budget what their actual expenses are. That's another common theme Biz and I have been trying to work on, is just to more accurately budget real expenses. And again, please, I'm just going to keep going, but please interrupt me if you want to talk about anything. Moving on to the tax collector, same thing, salary, I plugged in 2.5%. Data processing, salary, 2.5%. There's a large increase in what's labeled computer services. This might be something that we want to have Gino come in and explain more in person, but it's essentially, unlike that $30,000 or $48,000 capital appropriation we talked about earlier, this is really for contractual services, for whether it's cloud,
Backing up
backups, all that kind of stuff, which, what he's doing is, it's the right
Cybersecurity, that type
thing.
of
He's
stuff.
doing the right thing, and to do it properly is, going to cost a little more money. Town clerk, same thing with the salary, 2.5%. Under town meeting and elections, the increases here are all directly attributable to the extra elections, primaries, et cetera, that are being held this year. Conservation Commission, I have that secretary amount. It's very low. It's only $500. I want to confirm this is what was spent before, what was voted last year, what was asked for. It just seems really low, so I just want to make sure that's accurate. I have the number highlighted for zoning secretary again, because that's the person, or part of that increase is actually attributable to more meetings, things like all these marijuana dispensaries, special permit hearings. It's just a lot more public hearings than we've had in the past. But again, this is all just tying into me wanting to confirm these numbers as we look at that potential regulatory secretary. The utilities and maintenance, the increase here is really attributable to the custodial contract, which I think I mentioned right when I started. I actually cut back to just a hair under $10,000. But that custodial contract at Town Hall is funded out of that utilities maintenance increase. On the next page, 196, you'll see here, we do have plugged in this extra $65,000 for utilities. And again, it's highlighted in yellow because I just really need to make sure soon, within the next week or two, whether this will really be necessary or not. So we'll figure that out. Building inspector, same as other department heads, 2.5%. Now moving down to police, account 210 on page 14 to 29. They're only, so, everything here, and I should have mentioned this again earlier, all the salary increases are associated with collective bargaining agreements or individual employment agreements. So that's, especially things like police and fire, they're labor-intensive departments, so that, these are all numbers that can't be adjusted. Their supply line does have like a $20,000 increase in it. But in talking to the chief, you'll see it's actually still a lot less than what they actually spent in FY19. And I think what's happened here is, my guess is, to balance the budget, we
They take from other.
had to cut various accounts. But when you look at what these things are, utilities, phone, just various, expenses, it's in excess of that already. So this is just an effort to more accurately budget that account. We could certainly have the chief get into it in more detail, but when I went through the list with him on Friday, it's,
Makes sense.
yeah, it is what it is. Tree warden, again, that goes up by, I have that in here at 2.5%. The Rockland Public Schools education line, so that increase that gets to the number I highlighted in yellow, the 26,928,000. So that increase of 1.596 million corresponds to the very last page, which is the 70-30 split calculation. So the backup to that is the 70-30 split. And you'll see, if you just compare FY20 to what we're recommending, just that local contribution to the public schools, that's a 6.3% increase. So that's doing well.
And then at the same time, it looks like their enrollment to Votech and to the Aggie is down too, which is also having the impact of helping them.
Yep. And I believe these numbers with the South Shore Votech and the agricultural schools, these numbers are solid.
Awesome.
Highway superintendent, we plugged in a 2.5% increase. For snow and ice, if you remember, what we voted in for FY20 was $150,000. This was one of those items that we were hoping to better budget, and we initially were looking for $250,000. We brought it back down to $150,000 to balance the budget. We talked about that at a prior meeting. Going into waste disposal and collection, I highlighted the three big numbers that are going up: refuse collection, the disposal fee, and the bulky pickup. And I know some people from the public, understandably so, are frustrated when their fees go up, but it's literally out of our control. The Board of Health did a lot of work comparing other towns.
It's happening everywhere.
It happens all over the state. There's literally nothing you can do, nothing we can do about it. Well, the Board of Health has been proactive, working with our accounting department, and they have been increasing fees to cover this. So, but that's what that's not associated with any poor management, with anything that we're not doing correctly. It's just the cost.
Yeah, and it's not that they didn't do the contract right or whatever.
Nope,
It's just,
nope.
these are the fees that are going up because it's
Throughout the state and throughout the nation, everywhere.
throughout the entire country.
Throughout the entire country. Drainage repair, this is similar to snow and ice, where it was something that we were hoping to increase that budget, but we cut it back down to level fund it, again, just to balance the budget. Going on to the Board of Health, 510, it might look a little funny. The health agent salary is not actually going down. If you look at that footnote with the two asterisks, it talks about how what we're doing is actually doing a direct charge for a portion of the salary from the revolving fund,
Fees, yeah.
which is appropriate because the health agent does a lot of work associated with waste collection, so they can cover part of that. So what I have plugged in there in total for the health agent, and just like everybody else, was a 2.5% pending any other decisions that we might make later. The Visiting Nurse Association line has gone up a bunch, and my understanding from talking to the health agent is that needs to go up because of the work they're doing, monitoring infectious diseases, things like that in town. It's funny that the town I used to work in was one of the few that they have had and still have their own town nurse on salary. They actually have Sandwich has a nursing department. Most towns don't have that. Most towns contract it out to the VNA or a similar entity. So-
Just as a heads up,
Sure.
I know Avon, Randolph, and Abington are like actually entering. They're entering into like an IMA. I believe to share one public health nurse.
Oh, really?
And I believe they're interested in furthering expanding that as well.
What were the
so.
3 towns again?
The towns of Abington, Avon, and Randolph.
Randall. Huh. Yeah, well, that's something that we should explore then, That's interesting. Council on Aging Director, again, the 2.5%. Youth Commission, same thing, 2.5%. And I want to highlight again, I'm not going to get into it now, but I think if you look at some of these salaries, you'll see I do think a couple of these are a little bit out of whack. And I think in particular is once we finish looking at the gender equity audit that we've begun, we may need to make some adjustments to some of these salaries. The Veterans Agent is a really interesting line. You'll see that it is going down compared to FY20, but I assure you we're not cutting the budget for veterans. This is what the Veterans Agent has requested, and it really just reflects more accurately what they're actually spending and his ability to leverage other funds. So we're not in any way cutting veteran services, but rather than appropriate an amount that we know is unnecessary and then turning back money at the end, we're just reprogramming it where we need it.
And that's always been a changing number, depending on what the demand is from year to year. It's always fluctuated some.
The library director, so this number is lower than the FY20 number. As you know, our longtime library director, Beverly, is retiring. There's been a lot of discussions with our HR director and the library trustees, and this is the number that they feel very confident is appropriate for what they're advertising and what they expect to hire. So I think this number should be good. What's interesting in the library budget, I've highlighted the software licensing. So you'll see, because that's required. They got to have their licenses for all the various software. We're now going to fund that out of the library state aid, and that actually enables us to fully fund their books and related materials. So again, there's no cut to the library budget at all, but there's legitimate uses of state library aid, and this is one of them. So this is just a better way to reprogram some of their money. They can bump up their books and related
So by doing that,
materials.
we're actually fully funding the...
Yeah, they're going to be fully funded.
Okay.
Yep. So, let's see, moving on a couple pages to page 26 to 29, where we get to some of the benefits. So you'll see our group insurance budget is going up now to just a hair over $8 million. That reflects about a 4.7% increase year to year. That's health insurance, that we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but we do have a good plan, but health insurance, this is an issue nationwide. Big picture, 4.7% is really not that bad. Some, in the past, you may have seen double-digit increases, so this is pretty good. FICA expense, this is just one of those things that you got to pay, and we just have to, that's the Medicare line on the same page. That's just more accurately budgeting what our actual expenses are. And then our liability insurance line, you'll see, is going up by over 7%. All I can say there, I'll be, intentionally a little bit vague, but we do have some liability exposures, and those get factored into. That's all I can say. So hopefully in the future, that'll go down. And then at the end, we have the most recent calculation of the 70-30 split. I think this only changed by around maybe 20,000 or so from the last version that you saw. So, we got about a month. There's a couple of things I highlighted that I really need to focus on. I'm going to drill down on the utilities. I'm going to drill down on this regulatory secretary option. Then I think we really need to finalize some of those department head salaries. These are the things that I thought were most important to highlight to you. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have, or if you want to just chew on it, and we can discuss it further at the next meeting.
Any questions?
I don't have any right now.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug.
Sure.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda, other old business not reasonably anticipated. Nothing, Doug? I'll assume nothing? Other
Sorry,
old
no,
business?
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right. Okay, new business, Town Administrator Performance Review. All right, so as you guys are well aware, all of us conducted performance reviews, individual performance reviews on
We don't mention doesn't have to go into the public record.
I'm just saying that we're aware that we've conducted these reviews, and I'm going to read a couple things, just the rules of how we're going to go forward with this conversation. So, just to make the audience aware, anybody watching at home, each one of us conducted an individual review with the town administrator. We each submitted it. None of us have shared those reviews with each other. We met with Doug and went over each of our individual reviews, and then we submitted a copy to, each of us submitted our copies to Clifford and Kenny, Town Council, for them to compile a consensus Board of Selectmen performance review of the Town Administrator. So what, couple of the rules that I think I just want to point out before we get into the actual performance review itself, which Larry just actually mentioned, is during the open meeting discussion, board members may generally state their comments regarding the town administrator's performance. However, any reference to the individual performance assessment or reliance on that document during discussion renders the individual assessment a public record, subject to disclosure. So no getting into any of the specifics that are within that document, okay? Any of our individual documents. The other one that I want to point out, you guys all have a copy of it, and I know that this has been shared quite a bit, but the Board of Selectmen should formally vote afterwards to adopt the consensus review. The consensus compilation review document is a public record, and it's subject to disclosure upon request. It is not unheard of for towns to put the consensus document on the town website. So, without any further review, I'm just going to go through, kind of the highlighted top portion, and then just what the consensus of the board was as it pertains, but I won't go through each individual line. So in the first area, as far as leadership and staff effectiveness, some of the sample comments from our consensus was he's achieved buy-in of officials that are not direct reports, has created positive and inclusive culture, improved delegation, has a firm grasp of responsibilities, and has changed the culture of Town Hall for an overall rating of 4. Now, 4 being is exceeded expectations. The second one is planning and organizing. The comments would be, for overall rating was a 3.6 out of a possible 4. Doug has created a financial team of appointed elected financial officials, has established performance assessment as a priority, has worked with the Board of Selectmen to develop clear short and long-term objectives. The third area is communication and community relations. Doug achieved a 3.6 out of a possible 4. The comments are addresses residents' concerns in consistent and respectful manner, and improved communication with board members. Number 4 is problem solving, innovation, and decision making. I scored a 3.8 out of a possible 4. The comments are very analytical, able to see big picture, effectively assisted water department through major water main break and Board of Health during trash strike, showed effective communication and leadership skills during emergency situations, demonstrates good judgment and decision-making skills, good approach to problem solving, gathers all information, and discusses solutions with individual stakeholders. Number 5, under budget financial management, 3.4 out of a possible 4. And I think this might be some of the caveat, but currently going through first annual budget process, early to do thorough assessment of this area. Early positive signs including work with Finance Committee, inclusive process of budget development. Effectively identified and remedied budget deficiencies in current year budget. FY21 budget presentation was outstanding. Phasing out employment agreements for some positions. Area number 6, customer service and service quality. Doug achieved a 3.6 out of 4. Excellent job of setting example for customer service. Has worked closely with department heads to improve customer service throughout Town Hall. remains a work in progress, responds to requests for assistance from citizens in a more timely manner. Number 7, personal, professional, and organizational integrity. Doug received a 4 out of 4. Sets strong example for higher standards of professional integrity and ethics. Doug was actually recently, I think something that we're all very proud of, has recently been appointed to the MMMA Ethics Committee. And number 8, cross-departmental organizational management. Doug received a 3.6 out of 4. He's attended many board meetings. After hours, has generated positive feedback from those groups, holds regular department head meetings, improved relationship with school department. Just to go over a couple of Doug's prior year accomplishments. The first accomplishment that we saw as a board was stress the importance of ethics with town staff and led by example. Recently appointed to Mass Municipal Managers Association's Ethics Committee. 2, oversaw the development of town's operating and capital budget in conjunction with financial department heads, including working with the Finance Committee and Capital Planning Committee. 3, improved interdepartmental staff communications, all department head regular staff meetings, financial department head regular staff meetings, individual and joint personal interventions, etc. 4, improved effective communications between Town Administrator's Office and Board of Selectmen. 5, he established a positive working relationship with school department. 6, introduced the use of social media to improve citizen engagement and improve the public perception of the town. Also worked with Town Council to strengthen the town's social media policy. Our objectives for the coming year, and this is obviously in the review, but I think at some point in the next few months we should all sit down together again like we did on that Saturday that you referenced earlier, Mike, to go over a more in-depth goals and objectives for the coming year. First, lead the effort with the assistance of Town Council to eliminate unnecessary individual employment contracts and implement modern personnel policies. 2, finalize the FY21 operating and capital budgets by facilitating a consensus with the town's financial department heads, the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, Finance Committee, and Capital Planning Committee, and successfully present them to the May 2020 annual town meeting. 3, finalize the McKinley School Community Center feasibility study and present the report and a staff recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for future action. 4, continue to improve and maintain interdepartmental staff communications and relationships. And then, Doug, I think your overall score, if I recall, I don't think it says it, does it?
Yeah, I don't think it does.
I thought I saw it at one
What's that?
point, his overall score.
I think it looks like,
3.4.
looks like this.
Actually, average of summary grades was a 3.7
3.7.
out of a possible 4.
It's on the last, 3.7.
So, to say that you've had a very good year would be a drastic understatement. And I'll give you just an opportunity to read your comments or speak to your comments on the review stuff.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it was interesting meeting with each of you because you're all different. And some of you right out of the gate told me you're tougher graders or have different ways you approach it, and it was interesting. But I appreciate it. You're all different and gave me different insights. Maybe I'll just summarize generally what I wrote in my comments. The first thing was just that I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I did anticipate a lot of the things that I was going to have to work on, but there were a number of things that I just didn't know about, couldn't have foreseen, and it makes sense. You know, some of the real sensitive details you're not going to want out on camera. And I've been doing my best to balance, being prudent and cautious, but also not shying away from difficult conversations or making tough decisions. So I've tried to balance that, and it can be tricky. I think probably the most important thing, and I've said it to each of you, but I want to say it on camera for the public to hear as well, is that I can't tell you enough how much it means that you've given me, the confidence, and you've had the faith and the trust in me to do my job. The way that you guys have kind of stepped back, let me do the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day work, And when I need help, when I need support, when I need backup, you're all there for me, both individually as well as a board. That's all any manager could ever ask for, any administrator could ever ask for. And that's what's really led to the success of all of us as a group, is the way that you've balanced your role, giving me the freedom to do my role, and having confidence in me being new. That's tremendous. I also appreciate the foresight you had over the years to fill those 3 positions, to fund and fill those 3 positions that I mentioned in here, the assistant town administrator position, the IT director position, and the HR director position. I'm in that network of other town administrators throughout the state, and especially in eastern Massachusetts. And I talk to all new administrators, and it's so interesting to see the ones that struggle are the ones that don't have those positions filled, because what ends up happening is all of the time gets sucked up doing some of those other tasks instead of the bigger management issues that you hire someone like me to do. So the fact that you have found and filled 3 competent, hardworking team players that fill those roles, that's what enabled me to be able to do my job, and I certainly couldn't have done it without them. And then lastly, I just appreciate your support of professional development, my participation in ICMA, MMA, and MMMA. We have a number of complex challenges ahead of us and opportunities, and I look forward to continuing to lead the team under your direction that can help our community keep moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, so now I'll entertain a motion to accept the consensus performance review of Doug.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion, I have a second. I'll do this as a roll call. Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mr. Penny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And myself, that's affirmative. Thank you.
I have 2 other motions that I think would be helpful. This is based on the advice of the MMA's council. The first would be a vote to appoint me as town administrator for 3 years, effective July 8th of 2020. And then the second vote would be to authorize the board to enter into contract negotiations pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 108N, for a contract.
So moved on both?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mr. Penny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Great. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Doug.
you,
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, Town Administrator's Report and Correspondence.
Sure. So I did have 2 announcements. One was the town clerk wanted me to let the public know that next week is early voting for the presidential primary. So Monday through Friday, and those dates are the 24th to the 28th, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. At Town Hall. So early voting, avoid the lines and vote early. And then next I want to just read a very brief letter that I received from Rockland Police Officer Sergeant Brian Coakley, inviting all of you to attend this year's DARE graduation ceremony for the 5th grade students at the Rockland High School. We'd be honored to have you attend and speak to our students on this day. The DARE program covered several areas of information for our students. Together as a group, we discussed the dangers and effects of tobacco, alcohol, and various other drugs. We discussed ways to prevent and report bullying, and we also talked about how to develop skills to build healthy friendships and ways to deal with peer pressures. Each student completed a DARE report and made a commitment to remain drug and violence-free. The graduation ceremony will be held on Friday, February 28th at 10 a.m. in the Rockland High School auditorium. And this, I'll make copies of this for all of you, but it's Sergeant Brian Coakley, and he has an email and a phone number, which I'll put in your boxes if you're able to attend their ceremony. And then I just had a couple of quick things just to mention in my report. As we talked about earlier, I'm still working on the budget. That's like my number one thing for the next 4 to 6 weeks. We've also been doing a bunch of work behind the scenes with the school building project. There's been a lot of follow-up to the meeting that we had with the architect and the OPM on the permitting. We've had some good insights, input coming back from staff and some of the committee members on various town boards. gone back and forth with the architect and OPM. We've locked down the permitting calendar, so that's proceeding. We also had a conference call with the treasurer and the town accountant and the OPM to go over the financing of the project. And I think John is still in the room if he wants to jump in, but I think the tentative plan as of right now is John might be looking at doing a ban to do some short-term bond anticipation notes, some temporary borrowing, and then looking to do a big chunk of larger borrowing, and he wants to time it so that he can roll in some of the other projects we have, whether it's other road work or some of the other things previously voted at town meeting, so that it's always better to lump that kind of bonding together. So there's a lot of work going on the financing as we look at the cash flow, just to make sure we always have sufficient funds. John's making sure that he's timing, looking at interest rates, making sure we're borrowing the right amount, but not too much, because then you get an arbitrage and that whole thing. One thing we've talked about in executive session, but it's okay to talk about now in public session, as it's going to be on the warrant. We're looking at a property acquisition under open space recreation from the Community Preservation Act for a 7.3 acre parcel of land abutting Hearts of Park. You know about this. We've talked about it in executive session. You authorized me to negotiate a deal, which we've done, for a purchase price of $175,000. We've been busy. Town Council has been drafted a purchase and sale agreement contingent on successful votes with the Community Preservation Committee and town meeting. Worked it through with the seller's attorney. They've come to an agreement. The seller's already signed it. The original's on its way here, so that you'll definitely be able to put on the warrant, which will be a great thing, and I look forward to sharing more about that with the community. And then lastly, as we touched on earlier with the town meeting coming up, my plan is for your next meeting in the beginning of March, I'd like to have a draft list of all the warrant articles for you to look at, so you can get a sense of what we're looking at for the warrant. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Doug. Selectmen's comments. Comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen, are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few quick things. First of all, I just want to express our condolences to the Ball family of Rockland. There's a wake this evening, all right up the street for Terrence Ball, who passed away last week. Very sudden, very unfortunate. That has been difficult for a lot of folks in the Rockland, like in the town, and I just want to express our thoughts and condolences to the Paul family, first of all. I also wanted, the week before school vacation last week, there were like a couple of issues at the schools, one at the middle school, one at the high school. I just really want to thank and commend everyone involved in those situations, whether it be the high school principal, the middle school principal, the superintendent, and our law enforcement for handling those very difficult situations with the extreme and utmost integrity in class. I think when you look at the planning, when you look at the procedures that are in place, from everything I know of, as an observer, those policies and the procedures were followed. And it's another thing that really makes us all proud to, to know that when unfortunately there are going to be those situations, but when there are those situations that they handled, and they handled very effectively and swiftly. So I just want to thank them. And lastly, I just want to announce that the high school boys basketball team right now, I believe, is undefeated. And
one loss.
One loss. I apologize. I can never talk about sports.
I know.
They're ranked number one.
Really surprised.
Give it up. Okay. Yeah, I waded into uncharted territory and it just backfired. But there is a game tomorrow night at 7:45, and they're playing Abington, in the Carter Classic. And from what I'm hearing, even though my sports wherewithal is not good at all, it's going to be a really good game. So tomorrow night, 7:45 at the Abington High School gym.
They got a good goalie this year.
Shut up. That's all.
Ms. Nine.
I just want to remind residents that Restaurant Week, can I steal yours again?
Go ahead, do it.
I'll let you go.
No, that's fine. I'm only the founder. That's fine.
March 1st to March 7th. If you have a business in town that wants to create a special for that week, please reach out to us and will promote your special, and I encourage everyone to attend Restaurant Week.
Mike's not bitter at all.
I'm totally over it. Mr. Penny.
So I do want to say congratulations to the boys and girls high school teams. They have both qualified for the tournament, both highly ranked. As you said, the boys are ranked number 1 in Division III South. This marks, and I'm going to be wrong, but
It's okay.
54th year out of 57 for the boys and 47 out of the last 52, something like that, for the girls, qualifying for the tournament. And they both play tomorrow night in the championship game at Abington for that tournament. And after that tournament's done, the state tournament will begin, and they're both going to be highly ranked. And I honestly think both teams actually have a chance to go a long way in the tournament. So congratulations to the teams, to Coach Damon, and to Coach Mitchell.
Thank you.
That was way better than I could have ever done. Thank you.
But you tried. That was good.
I did.
A for effort.
Thank you.
Mr. Ryan.
All I have really is our friend Cheryl Beers, who was a school teacher in Rockland, and
My second grade teacher.
a good friend and a breakfast companion for many years, passed away recently, and she will be missed. She was a ball of fire and a wonderful person, and the town of Rockland is much better off for having her spend her life here. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm sure you got a great spot up there in the clouds. And that's all I have today.
Thank you, Art. I don't have much, and I ran the risk this year. I invited Kara to join me in running Restaurant Week, and I guess I ran the risk of her using that as her closing comments, but that's fine. Just to reiterate, March 1st through March 7th, I think we're looking at just under 20 restaurants this year. We're a little bit behind, but we should have a final list out probably tomorrow or by Friday at the latest. It's the 3rd year we're doing it. It's been pretty successful the last couple of years, hopefully this year, with some of the newer restaurants in town and some of the old restaurants being under new management. It might be a little bit different than what people have come to expect. So March 1st through March 7th, Restaurant Week. And with that, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose, number 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, and review and approval of executive session minutes of January 21st, 2020, not to reconvene.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Actually, we'll do roll call. Mr. Mullen?
Aye.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mr. Penny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And myself? Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.